If you've been playing TS Classic long enough, you might be familiar with the Riviera Line in the Fifties add-on of 2015. I remember it being decent for its time, but the 5 locomotives included with the route haven't aged particularly well, especially where the modified Hall 460 is concerned. The good thing is that all of the 50s Riviera locomotives have now been superseded by newer models from Victory Works, Caledonia Works, and Precision Locomotive Developments. Speaking of PLD, it's finally time to have a look at the new GWR 6800 Grange add-on, with this engine being the last of the Riviera Quintet to get remastered. Also, in before Bruce Hornsby and the Grange. But first, a brief history on the Grange. This was a class of 460 tender engines designed by Charles Collett and built between 1936 and 1939, with a total build-out of 80 locomotives. They looked very similar to the 4900 Hall class of 1928, albeit with smaller driving wheels, and consequently a higher tractive effort. It's worth mentioning that the Granges used wheels and motion from withdrawn 4300 class 260 tender engines. The original plan for the 4300s was to have the entire 342 strong class replaced in the aforementioned manner, but the Second World War interfered with the idea. Thinking back to the Grange class, they were successful mixed traffic locomotives, but their axle loading of 18.7 metric tons prevented them from running on certain regional lines that were previously worked by the 4300 class. As a result, a lighter version of the Grange, designated as the 7800 Manor class, was introduced in 1938, and these engines could run on routes with more severe weight restrictions, such as the Cambrian lines in Wales. Initially, 20 Manors were built in 1938 and in 1939, followed by a third batch, comprising 10 locomotives, built in 1950. Out of the 30 Manors that were built, 9 have survived into preservation, and come to think of it, the Great Western 460s had very good table Manors. 6801 Betton Grange was the first of her class to be withdrawn, going in October 1960. By December 1965, the entire class had gone, with none of the originals surviving into preservation. The last one to go was 6872 Crawley Grange. Apparently, 6816 Frankton Grange had been considered for preservation by the Great Western Society, but that obviously didn't work out. In 1998, a project was launched to build a brand new member of the Grange class. This locomotive was built using both new and existing components, including the boiler from modified Hall number 7927 Wellington Hall. After 26 years under construction, 6880 Betton Grange finally entered service in 2024, and I was lucky to see her in action at the Severn Valley Railway in April 2025. PLD released his GWR Grange add-on in September 2025, and it's available on his website for £20 at full price. My copy was acquired during PLD's New Year sale in late 2025, when there was a 30% discount available. This new model absolutely nukes the tired old thing from Riviera Line in the 50s where the modelling, texturing, and pretty much all other aspects are concerned. As far as I know, Dovetail's model doesn't include the nameplates for all 81 members of the class, a problem that was rectified on PLD's model. Incidentally, I was immediately reminded of a certain vintage American TV show upon seeing that one of these locomotives, number 6849, was named Walton Grange. In saying that, I've only seen 3 episodes of the Waltons so far. The first episode I watched was decent, albeit with unconvincing acting in a few scenes. And in a later episode called The Indiscretion, I did not like the subplot involving Elizabeth Walton because it hit too close to home, in a sense. Efforts to take my mind off that only mildly frustrating situation regarding Roland Orzabal mobilised Annie's Naughty Coffee enterprise, that was an acronym by the way, is one of the reasons why I'm as busy with making TS Classic or TSW videos as I am. In addition to the new build 6880 Betton Grange, you get all original members of the class and all the liveries they would have worn throughout their lives. The selection is as follows: GWR Green, 1934 to 1942, GWR Wartime Green with blanked out cab sides, GWR Wartime Black, 1942 to 1945, GWR Post-War Green, British Railways Transitional Green, BR Lined Black, which doesn't have a smokebox shed code for some reason, BR Lined Green with the early crest, and a second variant of BR Lined Green with the late crest. You also get 2 different 3,500 gallon tender types, one designed by Churchwood and the other designed by Collett. The latter is less familiar to me. As for other features on the Grange, these are pretty much the same as they are on the Hall and Modified Hall, although I don't mean to say that this is a bad thing. Indeed, I was quite impressed by the Halls and Modified Halls. I recommend reading the Grange's manual for full details on the included features, and for the purposes of this video, I'll just list some of the highlights. These were the realistic sounds supplied by Steam's Sound Supreme, Performance Mode, which is toggled with Ctrl-Shift-P, Animated valve gear inside of the frames, complete with dedicated cab camera views, Fluctuating water level depending on the route gradient, a customizable lamp arrangement, see the manual for keyboard commands, a good selection of headboards, which can be cycled through with H or Shift H, simple mode, which is toggled with Ctrl-Shift-S, and variable locomotive conditions. By default, the Grange is set to condition 5, which is essentially mint condition, but you can worsen the engine's condition in the scenario editor. Condition 1 is described in the manual as, quote, a leaky loco and run-down condition, and will thus be harder to drive/make steam, unquote. Thinking back to simple mode, it makes the locomotive easier to drive by removing the reverser lock, steam chest simulation, and vacuum brake ejector functionality. Even then, these engines are still not fully compatible with the F4 heads-up display, and that's just about the only thing I dislike about PLD locomotives in general. may not be as familiar with PLD locomotives as I am with their Caledonia Works counterparts, but I didn't think the Grange was too difficult to drive. According to the manual, this locomotive's ideal fire mass is 901 pounds. As I have seen with other PLD products, the normal fire control on the F4 heads-up display doesn't work. Instead, you have to press F to pay respects and open the firebox doors, then hold down the R key to shovel coal. Meanwhile, there are both exhaust and live injectors for water and steam. I forget exactly how they work on the real locomotives, but I do know that the live injectors in-game are controlled with L and O respectively, while the exhaust injector controls are K for water and I for steam. The injectors take a while to get going, and I find that they're more effective when the regulator is closed. If you'd prefer not to deal with manual firing and injector controls, you have the option to use the auto fireman and auto injector features by pressing Ctrl-Shift-F and Ctrl-Shift-I respectively. I was curious to see how 6803 Betton Grange would perform on a run from Kirkby Stephen East to Bowes, going over Stainmore Summit in the process. Things were initially going well as he made it up to around 27 miles per hour and still accelerated a little bit on the inclines past Marygill Viaduct, but things started to go wrong when he hit the 1 in 60. I find that, in a situation like this, it's not easy to get the right regulator and reverser settings to maintain speed without losing too much boiler pressure, even more so when you've got the injectors open. Buck was down to 5 miles per hour before too long, but I didn't want to stop and raise steam because of how hard it would likely be to get the heavy train moving again on a 1 in 60 grade. Just before the 80 Gill Viaduct, the boiler got up to around 158 psi and Buck started accelerating once again. He was up to 13 miles per hour by the time the back of his train cleared the viaduct. The safety valves started blowing off soon after the fact, and I tried my best to keep the boiler pressure up as Buck plodded along to Stainmore Summit. He got up to around 32 miles per hour on the slightly gentler grade through Barras Station, but was down to 14 miles per hour by the time he got to the summit, and I'd used up 560 gallons of water. Even so, Stainmore was still conquered with simple mode, auto fireman, and auto injectors disabled. A decent achievement, even if I do say so myself. Just for the heck of it, here is 6880 Betton Grange with other new build steam locomotives. Let me know in the comments if there are any other British standard gauge new builds available for TS that I've forgotten. In closing, I'm impressed by this new depiction of the GWR Grange class, with my only criticisms being A, the lack of weathered variants in this pack, and B, the chuff sounds being a bit iffy around 21 to 25 miles per hour. PLD's locomotives can seem pretty complicated and daunting if you've never tried them before, but with enough practice, the experience of driving these engines can feel rewarding. That's how I found it, at least. As for where I'd rate the Grange, I think she deserves an 8 out of 10.